vision of, as he calls it, a constitutional regime change that would take back power from this oligarchy. So diffuse, most people hardly even knew it was there. That's what makes it so hard to kill, he said. And because it's so hard to kill, it also removes from me the responsibility of actually killing it.
He's saying that like Harvard and Yale should fight each other. I'm kind of stuck on that. Like should Harvard and Yale be like, no, we have two different versions of like physics. No, our land acknowledgement is better than yours.
I suppose in his world they'd be fighting over who owned more slaves when they were founded, and why that was a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what he means by that. Maybe he explains it.
Well, I think he's saying is that like Harvard and Yale, they're competing, right, for a student body, so they should embody competing political ideologies. Well, I mean, so like Harvard is doing land acknowledgements, and then Yale should be like doing sort of a land end zone dance. We're like, hey, hey, the Nassapequa Indians, suck my dick. We got your land, and then does the tomahawk chop or something.
Yeah, Harvard should colonize new land.
It's in the article, but like another part of Yarvin's idea is that like after the American Caesar takes over following some sort of like crisis or cataclysm, that they should run America like a startup. So this is this is the level of like I said, a very dangerous and certainly and radical ideas that I find quite frightening.
Yeah, I haven't heard ideas this bold since the Republican Revolution of 1994.
Wait, the government should be run like a business? What?
No way.
If even one of these new terrifying nationalistic conservatives, if even one of them cracks the code on how the government should have a budget like a family does, then we're fucked. It's over for us.
My God, a president who has an MBA? Could you imagine?
Did you guys know that when Hitler was looking for Santa Claus in Antarctica to find esoteric knowledge, he found ancient runes that depicted a balanced budget amendment?
At a coffee shop near the house he'd bought when he moved back home to Tucson from the Bay Area, Masters and I went through the tenets of his nationalist platform: onshoring industrial production, slashing legal immigration, regulating big tech companies, and eventually restructuring the economy so that one salary would be enough to raise a family on. I mentioned Yarvin in his line of arguing that America's system had become so sclerotic that it was hopeless to imagine making big systematic changes like these. In a system where the state capacity is very low, I started the question. Alas, he said with a twinkle in his eye. Do we need a crisis to get there, I asked him. Maybe, he said. It wasn't where his immediate thinking was. I'll have the proverbial machete, he said. But yeah, it may take some time of crisis to get us there. He'll have the proverbial machete. He just wants to make that clear. He will be, again, he'll be chopping the tall trees in the fucking metaverse. He'll be doing digital gardening. He paused. But we're already sort of in one, right? Masters often says he's not as black-pilled and pessimistic as some in the new right spheres. He seems, unlike many new writers, to still earnestly believe in the power of electoral politics. But he does think that the culturally liberal and free market ideology that has guided America's politics in recent years is a hopeless dead end. A country is not just an economy, Masters told the dissident right outlet I Am 1776 recently. Wait, I Am 1776.
That's the sequel to I Am Sam. It stars the same main character.
Wait, it's like I just like once again, this is like the dissident new right, and the name of this outlet is like the spirit of 1776. You also need a conception of yourself as a nation, as a people, and as a culture, and that's what America is increasingly lacking today. It's true that I'm incredibly hopeful, he said to me. I think it's really bleak. I think the default is continued stagnation, and maybe you get the crisis in 5 years, or maybe it's 30 years from now. He told me like he didn't like to use terms like the cathedral and use the regime less often than Vance, although I later noted that he used this latter phrase frequently with interviewers on the dissident right. The regime sounds sexy, right? He said to me, it's a tangible enemy. You could just grapple with it in the right way. You can topple it. And I think it's actually just a lot less sexy and a lot more bureaucratic, he said. But I've read that stuff, and I see what it means. He goes, we drove together to a campaign event talking about everything from how technology is reshaping our brains to environmental policies. Both of us circling from different political directions to an apocalyptic place. I do think we're at a moment of crossroads, he said, and if we play it wrong, it's the dark ages. Masters has publicly said he thinks everyone should read the Unabomber's anti-tech manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, which may sound strange for a young tech executive running to serve in the United States Senate. But to Masters, Kaczynski's critique was a useful analysis of how technology shapes our world and how degrading and debasing it can be to human lives. I think it's so interesting, like I said, like that, like these guys love Ted Kaczynski, and like they're talking about the ways in which I think they read him because like that's a very smart book to read if you were looking to become a like tech billionaire or millionaire. Because like I think they read it as an instruction manual about how technology can debase and degrade human life for fun and profit.
I kind of think that like Ted Kaczynski's work for like right wingers and more aptly like dissident right kind of online figures, that's the Ibrahim Kendi book for them. Because they all love reading it and being like, oh my God, he's so right. And then like on screens 28 hours a fucking day. It's the exact same thing.
He goes, I asked whether he thought the core of his project was a fight against a consumerist techno-dystopia that many on the left have also come to fear. He said yes. I asked why, if that was the case, it almost never came across in his mainstream media appearances. That's interesting feedback, he said, that it's not coming through. I go on, and it's the tail end of a B block, and I've got 2 minutes to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse, he said earlier, talking about his spots on Fox News. And it's like, well, the left is insane, and this kid shouldn't have been on trial, and they're punishing him for being a white guy who defended himself with an AR-15. Conservative media seems to thrive on culture war touchpoints as much as all the rest of it. I feel like I'm willing to go there, he said, but you can't do that on Laura Ingraham's sound bites. He was a little less rosy about the future with some interviewers than he was with me. We need someone with their hand on the tiller who understands where we've been and where we need to go, he told the podcaster Alex Kashuta recently. Otherwise, we will totally get owned by the progressive left. And the progressive left just remains the enemy. It's the enemy of true progress. It's the enemy of everything that is good. I asked if he could give me a vision of what he thought victory for his side would look like. It's just families and meaningful work, he said, so that you can raise your kids in worship and pursue your hobbies and figure out what the meaning of it all is.
In the metaverse.
Yeah. Pretty much anyone could agree with this, and pretty much anyone could wonder how it is that this sort of thing has come to seem radical or distant from the lives of so many people growing into adulthood today. It just feels so networked, he said. It's so in the matrix. So once again, it's like that's the cathedral right there, because the metaphors you use to describe your technological impression are the products of that same engine of cultural reproduction.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that they're trying to, honestly, everybody is trying to do more than anything is reject and deny the unassimilatable truth that everyone's the same. Everybody has been turned into, in practice, like in their habits and preferences, in every meaningful way, into the same person. And that politics is just a way to imagine oneself differently. Enough to assuage the anxiety of that process of homogenization.
Yeah, that is why politics is for freaks, because only freaks cannot reconcile the fact that they are the same.
All right, and just finally, let's get to him talking to J.D. Vance. So he says, a couple of hours later, I found Vance standing up by the bar, surrounded by a circle of young and identical-looking fanboys. I went over. He asked what I thought of the speech, and he suggested we find somewhere to talk. He asked me to turn my recorder off so we could speak candidly. I agreed with regret because the conversation revealed someone who I think will be hugely influential in our politics in the coming years, even if he loses his Senate primary, as both of us thought was possible. It also revealed someone who is in a dark place, with a view that we are at an ominous turning point in American history. He didn't want to describe this to me on the record, but I can show it anyway because he already says it publicly, and you can hear it too. That night, I went up to my hotel room and listened to a podcast interview Vance had conducted with Jack Murphy, the big, bearded head of the Liminal Order men's group. Murphy asked how it was that Vance proposed to rip out America's leadership class. Vance described two possibilities that many on the new right imagine, that our system will either fall apart naturally or that a great leader will assume semi-dictatorial powers. So there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about some of these things, Vance said. Murphy chuckled knowingly. So one option is to basically accept that this entire thing is going to fall on itself, Vance went on. And so the task of the conservatives right now is to preserve as much as can be preserved, waiting for the inevitable collapse of the current order. He said he thought this was pessimistic. I tend to think we should seize the institutions of the left, he said, and turn them against the left. We need a de-Bathification program, a de-wokeification program. But again, like, I just have to ask, what would that actually look like, seizing the institutions of the left? I don't know, that would take some sort of dictatorial process. I mean, that would take
It cannot be done. What it can be done is, as Felix says, is creating parallel versions of them. that are separate and probably headquartered in a different geographic area.
Yeah, Austin versus
this
San
fantasy
Francisco.
of conquering the center, it will never happen. The center will just dissolve, and then you will just have to create mirrored versions of these institutions held by your people. That's the closest thing to power that can really be pursued, but you can't really pursue that because we still all have to maintain the kayfabe that this is going to maintain the structure of like a single social unit, which it already isn't.
Yeah, and if you debathify Harvard or Yale, if you de-wokeify them, you're just going to start the woke state of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Okay? And you don't like your troops will be captured and made to do land acknowledgments on camera.
I mean,
All your barefoot and pregnant women will be kept in cages.
I mean, I guess just reading the way like that these guys, from a bird's eye view, like the generally pessimistic view that they have of like American society and like the political, economic, and cultural institutions that govern us, I think is broadly shared by like people on the left and right. So like I'm just like, you know what I mean? Like it's just like, I mean, their prescriptions for it I think are ludicrous, but I think that they're like you said at the beginning about like people going from left to right is like the oldest thing in the book. It happens all the time, and I think it's just a matter of like how much you want to like feel like a loser as things continue to get worse and worse.
Yeah. How you want to feel like you're in charge somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
You're participating in something, that you're not just having history roll over you.
So to that end, he says, we are in a late Republican period, Vance said, evoking the common new right view of America as Rome awaiting its Caesar. If we are going to push back against it, we're going to have to get pretty wild and pretty far out there and go in directions that a lot of conservatives right now are uncomfortable with. I mean, like, again, like left unsaid is like, what are those directions that like the current conservative movement would be uncomfortable with? Is it strengthening? It certainly isn't strengthening labor unions or anything like universal health care, which might actually ameliorate the problems about, like starting families and having a single income household or whatever, or like having meaningful work or having work that doesn't drain you of like your sense of what Masters said about like meaningful work that like, gives you the ability to like, live life on your own and sort of figure out what the meaning of it all is. Well, I mean, like that's not the way things are going now. And it's certainly not being helped along the way by people like Peter Thiel or Jeff Bezos or fucking Bill Gates. And, like, that's like left, right, and center, whatever you want to say. Like the billionaires, the people who own everything, like it doesn't seem like they're interested in making a world where people have more free time